The purchase contract cost everything Griff Hawthorne owned. He stood in the entrance of the dilapidated repair facility on station Kepler 9, surveying what passed for his new life. The garage was a disaster. Equipment rusted in corners. Oil stains covered every surface. The main lift platform had not functioned in at least 5 years. The previous owner, a Threxian named Colmar Venth, had died 3 months ago, and the estate liquidators were desperate to unload the property. Griff had seen worse. Fallujah had been worse. Kandahar had been worse. Hell, his last deployment to the Proxima colonies during the insurrection had been infinitely worse than a dirty garage that just needed work and attention. At least here, nobody was shooting at him. "You are certain about this purchase?" asked Station Administrator Fells, a bureaucratic Kathrani whose bioluminescent patterns pulsed with barely concealed skepticism. "The facility requires extensive repairs. The business had minimal revenue for the past decade. Most residents use the automated repair bays on level 7. This establishment is what you humans would call a lost cause." "Then I should fit right in," Griff said, signing the final documents with hands that only shook slightly. The tremor was barely noticeable now. Another year and the doctors said it might disappear entirely. Just one more gift from the neural damage he had sustained when his transport took a direct hit from insurgent railgun fire. Fells transferred the deed and access codes. The previous owner's personal effects remain on the second floor. The liquidators deemed them worthless. "You may dispose of them as you see fit." After the administrator left, Griff stood alone in his garage. 38 years old. Medically discharged from the Terran Marines after 16 years of service. No family. No prospects. Just a modest disability pension and the desperate need to do something, anything, that did not involve sitting in a government housing unit staring at walls while his mind replayed firefights that would never end. He had chosen this place because it was quiet. Because it was far from Earth. Because working with his hands might give him purpose that therapy and medication could not provide. The first floor was devoted to vehicle repair. The equipment was outdated but salvageable. Griff spent 3 days cleaning, organizing, and inventorying what he had to work with. The physical labor felt good. It gave his body something to do besides jump at loud noises and wake up at 0300 convinced he was back in combat. On the 4th day, he climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor. The space had served as living quarters for Colmar Venth. 1 room. A sleeping alcove sized for a Threxian, a species that stood nearly 3 meters tall with 4 arms and chitinous plating across their torsos. A small food preparation area. A refresher unit that looked barely functional. And against the far wall, a storage locker that was sealed with a biometric lock. Griff studied the lock. It was sophisticated, military-grade encryption. Unusual for a civilian mechanic. He pulled up the access codes the liquidators had provided, but none of them worked on this particular lock. That made him curious. He spent 2 hours bypassing the security, using skills the Marines had taught him during his force reconnaissance training. When the lock finally clicked open, Griff pulled the door wide and found himself staring at the carefully preserved history of someone else's war. The locker contained a military uniform. Not Terran, but unmistakably military. The armor plating was scorched and pitted with weapons damage. The insignia marked the wearer as a combat engineer in the Threxian Defense Legion. Campaign ribbons covered one shoulder, so many ribbons that Griff could not count them all. Beneath the uniform lay something that made his chest tighten: service records. Griff pulled the first file and activated the datapad. Text appeared in Threxian script, but his translator implant converted it to standard automatically. Service record: Colmar Venth rank, Chief Engineer, 1st Class Unit, 47th Combat Engineering Battalion deployments, 23 combat actions, 147 decorations, Medal of Valor, 3, Distinguished Service Cross, 5, Campaign Ribbons, 18. The numbers made Griff's hands shake worse than they had in months. 23 deployments. That was more than most career soldiers saw. The Threxian had spent decades in combat zones, building forward operating bases, clearing mines, constructing defensive positions under enemy fire. Griff knew that life. He had lived it. The exhaustion that never ended. The hypervigilance that became second nature. The way every sound made you reach for a weapon. The friends who died in your arms. The civilians you could not save. The moral compromises that seemed necessary at the time but haunted you decades later. He continued reading, the files painting a picture of a soldier who had served with distinction. Colmar had been wounded 7 times. He had saved his entire unit during an enemy artillery barrage by reinforcing a collapsing bunker with his own body. He had volunteered for the most dangerous assignments. He had done everything a good soldier was supposed to do. And then, 32 years ago, he had retired. Not honorably discharged. Not medical. Just retired. The records ended abruptly with a notation that Colmar had declined re-enlistment and requested immediate separation from military service. No explanation. No reason given. Just a veteran walking away from the only life he had known. Griff found more files deeper in the locker. Personal logs. Colmar had kept a journal during his final deployment. Griff activated the first entry, and a holographic recording materialized in the air. The image showed a younger Colmar Venth in combat armor, his 4 arms moving through post-battle equipment checks with practiced efficiency. He looked directly at the recording device and spoke in Threxian, the words translated by Griff's implant. Day 147 of Deployment Cycle 9. We held the forward position at Kelvarath Ridge. Enemy casualties estimated at 300. Our casualties, 16 wounded, 4 dead. I knew all of them. I have known too many dead. I am beginning to forget what peace feels like. Griff closed his eyes, the words hitting too close to home. He knew that feeling. The numbness that came from losing people over and over until grief became just another task to manage. He skipped forward through the logs, watching Colmar document deployment after deployment. The Threxian's voice remained calm and professional, but Griff recognized the signs. The way he took longer pauses before speaking. The moments where his hands stopped moving and he just stared at nothing. The careful control that came from holding trauma in check through sheer force of will. Then came the final entry. Dated 32 years ago, recorded in what appeared to be a rear area rest facility. Colmar sat alone in a small room. His armor was off, his chitinous plating scarred from decades of combat. He looked directly at the recording device and spoke words that made Griff's chest ache. This is my last entry. Tomorrow I submit my retirement papers. 23 deployments. 34 years of service. I thought I was fighting for something important. I thought if I just served long enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, the fighting would end. But it never ends. There is always another war. Always another enemy. Always another generation of young soldiers who do not yet understand what they are getting into. Colmar's 4 hands moved restlessly, a gesture Griff recognized as the Threxian equivalent of clenching fists. I am tired. Not physically, the Threxians are resilient. But tired in a way that sleep does not fix. Tired of watching friends die. Tired of building structures that will be destroyed in the next offensive. Tired of the sound of artillery. Tired of the smell of burning. Tired of carrying dead weight in my chest that gets heavier every year. The Threxian was silent for a long moment, then continued. I am leaving. I do not know what I will do in the civilian world. I have no skills beyond combat engineering. But I cannot do this anymore. I cannot pretend that what we are doing is noble when all I see is waste. Young lives wasted. Resources wasted. Opportunities wasted. I have given everything I can give. Now I need to find out if there is anything left of me beyond the soldier. The recording ended. Griff sat on the floor of the garage, surrounded by the artifacts of another veteran's life, and wept. He wept for Colmar Venth, who had fought for 3 decades and retired to a quiet life fixing vehicles in a forgotten corner of a space station. He wept for himself, for all the years he had given to the Marines, for all the friends he had buried, for all the nightmares that would not end. He wept for every soldier of every species who had ever worn a uniform and come home broken. He did not know how long he sat there. Eventually, the tears stopped. The tremor in his hands had calmed. And for the first time since his discharge, Griff felt like he understood something important. Colmar had found peace here. Not the peace of forgetting, the service records and journal proved he had never forgotten. But the peace of building something instead of destroying. The peace of fixing what was broken. The peace of quiet work that helped people without requiring violence. Griff made a decision. He would not just run the garage. He would honor what Colmar had built here. He would make it a place where things got repaired instead of discarded. Where people could come for help without judgment. Where an old soldier's final years had been spent creating instead of destroying. Over the following weeks, Griff transformed the facility. He repaired the lift platform. He organized the tools properly. He advertised basic services at fair prices. Business was slow at first, most station residents preferred the automated bays, but gradually, customers began to arrive. They came because Griff was patient. Because he explained what he was doing and why. Because he did not overcharge or recommend unnecessary repairs. Because there was something calming about watching someone work with their hands, making broken things whole again. One afternoon, an elderly Threxian female entered the garage, moving slowly with the careful gait of advanced age. She looked around the facility with an expression Griff could not quite read. "You are the new owner," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." "Griff Hawthorne. How can I help you?" "I am Selvara Kempf. I was Colmar Vent's partner for 40 years. I heard a human had purchased his garage. I wanted to see what you had done with it." Griff felt his throat tighten. "I found his service records. His uniform. His journals. I am sorry for your loss." Salvara's eyes, large and multifaceted in the Threxian way, studied him with intensity. "You are military. I can see it in how you move. How you watch the doors. How you keep your back to walls. Marines. 16 years. Medical discharge." Colmar never spoke about his service to most people. He spent 30 years in the Defense Legion and then 32 years trying to forget it. But he could not forget. None of them can. "Do you know what he told me once?" He said the war never ends for soldiers. It just moves from the battlefield to inside their heads. Griff nodded slowly. "I know. I know exactly what he meant." Salvara moved to the storage locker, still open where Griff had left it. She ran one hand over the scarred armor. He kept all of this. He could have destroyed it, could have tried to erase that part of his life. But he kept it. I think because he did not want to forget the people he served with. The ones who died. He felt he owed them memory. "I understand," Griff said quietly. "I have a box of patches from my unit. Squad patches. Memorial patches. Names of people who are not coming home. I cannot throw them away. That would be like killing them a second time." "Then you do understand." Salvara turned to face him fully. Colmar found peace here. This garage was not much, not prestigious, not profitable. But it was his. He could work with his hands, could fix things, could help people in small ways that did not require violence. It gave him purpose without trauma. "Do you know what I am asking you?" "You are asking if I will honor that. If I will make this place what he wanted it to be." "Yes." Griff looked around the garage, seeing it with new eyes. This was not just a business. It was a sanctuary. A place where a veteran had tried to heal. Where broken things got fixed and broken people found purpose. "I promise," he said. "I will make this work. I will make it a place that helps people. That fixes what can be fixed. That gives purpose to someone who needs it." Colmar built something good here, even if most people did not see it. "I am not going to let that fade away." Salvara's bioluminescent pattern shifted to colors that indicated approval. Then you have my blessing. And if you need anything advice about the business, stories about the customers Colmar liked, or just someone who understands what it is like to love a soldier who came home changed, you can find me on level 3, section 7. After she left, Griff returned to the storage locker. He carefully folded Colmar's uniform and placed it in a protective case. The decorations he arranged in a display frame. The journals he backed up to multiple data storage devices. This was not his history, but it was important. It deserved to be preserved. Then he did something that surprised himself. He went to his own quarters and retrieved the box he had been carrying since his discharge. Inside were his Marine dress uniform, his own decorations, the unit patches from 16 years of service. He brought them to the garage and placed them beside Colmar's belongings. 2 veterans. 2 species. 2 different wars fought decades apart on opposite sides of the galaxy. But the same scars. The same struggle to find purpose after the fighting ended. The same desperate need to believe that all the sacrifice had meant something. Griff created a small memorial wall in the corner of the garage. Colmar's uniform on one side. His own on the other. Between them, he mounted a simple plaque in both standard and Threxian script. In honor of all who served. May they find peace. Word spread slowly about the memorial. Veterans started coming to the garage. Not always for repairs, sometimes just to see. To stand in front of the wall and remember. To talk with someone who understood what they had been through. A Kathrani female who had served as a medic during the border conflicts. A human male who had lost his legs in the same campaign where Griff had been wounded. A Vrexian pilot who had flown 300 combat missions and still woke up screaming. They came alone at first. Then in small groups. The garage became an unofficial meeting place. Somewhere veterans could gather without judgment or expectation. Where the civilian world did not demand they pretend to be okay. Where the memories could be shared with people who understood. Griff found himself hosting irregular gatherings. No formal structure. No therapy sessions. Just veterans working on vehicles together, sharing stories, helping each other with the daily battle of surviving after combat. One evening, 6 months after he had purchased the garage, Griff was closing up when a young human soldier entered. The kid could not have been more than 22, fresh from some deployment, still carrying the rigid posture and constant vigilance of someone recently returned from combat. "Are you Griff Hawthorne?" the soldier asked. "I am. I heard this was a place for veterans. That you understand what it is like." Griff saw himself in that young face. The exhaustion. The confusion. The desperate hope that someone, somewhere, could explain how to survive the peace after surviving the war. "I do understand," Griff said. "Come on. Let me show you something." He led the soldier to the memorial wall and told him about Colmar Venth. About a Threxian combat engineer who had served for 3 decades and then spent 3 more decades trying to heal. About how the war never really ended for soldiers, but how they could still find purpose. Still build things. Still help people. Still matter. "Does it get better?" the soldier asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Griff chose his words carefully, remembering how Colmar's journal had described the weight that got heavier every year. "It gets different. The nightmares do not go away completely. The hypervigilance does not disappear. The memories do not fade. But you learn to carry them. You find ways to make the weight bearable. And you discover that there is more to you than just the soldier you were. There is who you can become after." "How did you find that?" Griff gestured to the garage around them. "I bought this place thinking I just needed work. Something to do with my hands. But what I found was Colmar's story. I found out that I was not the first person to struggle with coming home. That veterans of every species face the same battles. And I learned that there is honor in building things. In fixing what is broken. In creating spaces where people like us can exist without pretending to be okay. The young soldier looked at the memorial wall for a long time. Then he turned back to Griff. "Can I come back?" "Not for repairs. Just to be here. Around people who get it. Any time. That is what this place is for." Over the next year, the garage thrived in ways Griff had never expected. The repair business remained modest, but it was sustainable. More importantly, the space became something larger than commerce. It became a community center for veterans. A place where the unspoken rules of civilian society did not apply. Where you did not have to explain why loud noises made you flinch. Where everyone understood the 1,000-yard stare. Where your service mattered, but did not define you. Griff stood in the garage one evening, watching a Threxian engineer and a human mechanic working together to repair a transport vehicle. They were laughing about something, their earlier trauma temporarily forgotten in the simple pleasure of work and companionship. He thought about Colmar Venth. About a soldier who had served with distinction and then walked away to build a quiet life in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. About how that same soldier had created something meaningful without even realizing it, a template for how veterans could transition from warriors to builders, from destroyers to creators. Griff understood now why Colmar had kept his service records. Not to remember the glory, there was no glory in the journals, just exhaustion and loss. But to remember that service had happened. That it had mattered. That the young soldier who had volunteered all those years ago deserved to be acknowledged, even if the old mechanic wanted nothing more than peace. The memorial wall had grown. Other veterans had added their own service records, their own photos, their own memories. It was becoming an archive of warrior service across species. A testament to the universal experience of those who had seen combat and survived. One day, Salvara returned to the garage. She stood before the memorial wall for a long time, studying the new additions. "Colmar would be proud," she said finally. "He spent 32 years trying to forget. But you have honored his service while still giving him the peace he wanted. You have done what he could not, you have integrated the soldier and the civilian into something whole. Thank you for that." "I am just doing what he taught me," Griff replied. "He showed me that there is life after service. That veterans can find purpose without violence. That the skills we learned in war can be used for peace. I am just following the path he cleared." Salvara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to colors that meant deep emotion. "I wish he had known you. I think you two would have understood each other well. I think we do understand each other. Through his journals. Through this place. Through the example he left behind." After she departed, Griff returned to his work. There was always something that needed fixing. Always someone who needed help. Always another veteran who needed to know they were not alone. His hands still trembled sometimes. The nightmares still came. The memories still hurt. But Griff had learned something from a dead Threxian engineer: you did not have to be completely healed to be helpful. You did not have to have all the answers to provide support. You just had to show up, do the work, and create spaces where healing could begin. The garage was not much. Just a repair facility on a backwater station. But it had become a sanctuary for those who had given everything and were trying to figure out what came next. It was Colmar Venth's legacy, preserved and expanded by another veteran who understood the weight of service. And every day, when Griff opened the doors and welcomed whoever needed help, he honored not just Colmar but every soldier who had ever fought and survived and struggled to find peace. The war never truly ended for veterans. But in this small corner of the galaxy, they had found something almost as good. They had found each other. And that made the weight a little easier to carry. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe for more. Thank you.